Why don't we start just, I think we did a quick run of introductions, but I think we could start with that. So I'm Andrea Eid. I'm with Google Cloud, been with Google for the past 4 years, partnering with Ulta all of that time, so it's been fabulous. I'm super excited to be here and moderate this discussion today. DE&I is certainly a passion of Google, one that we take very serious, and me personally as well. I have a daughter who's now 17, but came out as gay at 15, so commend her bravery and always embrace the opportunity, as I have two teenage daughters, so to speak on this topic is super important to me. So that's me, a little bit of me, and we'll just go down the line and have you guys say a little bit about yourself. And
Jen, do you want to start?
We'll start with you, John, and then we'll just kind of proceed.
Hi everyone, my name is John Higginson. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Chief. If you don't know Chief, Chief is a private network for professional women. It's focused on women who are VP, SVP, C-suite and above. And the whole mission of Chief is to get more women into leadership and keep them there. Prior to Chief, I was CTO at Groupon, CTO at FTD, and I started my career as a software engineer. But I've worked across a lot of different consumer organizations and focused both on how to connect with audiences and customers, particularly diverse audiences, as well as how to build diverse teams internally. And those two things, as we'll talk about, are incredibly intertwined.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Liu. I'm Director of Integrated Marketing here at Ulta Beauty, and I lead our master brand equity initiatives and campaigns, as well as our DEI kind of marketing efforts. I've been here about 7.5 years. Prior to that, I was at PepsiCo, so I mean, the Chicago kind of marketing space is rather small, so I feel like lots of familiar faces and all of that.
Awesome. I'm Michelle McAlister. I'm Senior Director of Marketing at PepsiCo. I lead our brand equity and base teams as well as innovation and insights. At PepsiCo, I've been there for a few years now, but I'm a longtime CPGer, so my career has been Unilever, Kellogg's for a while, PepsiCo. So big time CPG girl. Multicultural marketing and DEI isn't my area of focus, but it's part of my job, right? If you think about everything that we touch across all the brands. So really excited to lean in on the conversation.
Excellent, excellent. I think we'll start off with just an opening question for each of the panelists, and you can just jump in as to who wants to go first. How does your business approach and think about DE&I and marketing? I think it's a good way to kick off an open
I think
discussion.
I just voluntold him because you were just right
There was a secret vote.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so marketing for us is a little bit different because we're a professional network, so we are talking to women and companies about either supporting, talking to them directly, supporting them directly, or talking to their companies and saying we can be part of your leadership development program, bring your senior women leaders into Chief, and we can help them grow and learn in doing that. And our marketing is either direct to companies through that lens, or through vehicles like LinkedIn, where we talk about not just our mission, but also our members. And our members actually wind up being one of the most important ways that we actually communicate, because our members will post about on LinkedIn. If you've ever followed a Chief as a company or a Chief member, you'll see them post about things that they're doing with Chief. We give away an awful lot of clothing. I've been asked by people, because I have a bunch of Chief sweatshirts. I just have my 1-year anniversary, so now I have a Chief robe. I'm not kidding. We put out a lot of clothing, but our members actually will post and wear that, and post that, including like with their daughters wearing it, and that's a good way to do it. But underneath that is we have a real commitment beyond focusing on women to focusing on women of color. And today, 35% of our members are women of color, and we have a lot of help from them talking about how valuable that has been for them and their careers, because we can talk about some of the stats, but women in color are particularly underrepresented in corporate America.
So at Ulta Beauty, when you think about DE&I, it's very much embedded in our core company values. So it's integrated and threaded throughout all the Ulta Beauty people here know this, across all of the functions as far as merchandising, supply chain diversity, all of the spaces and all of the things. From a marketing perspective, though, when we think about it, our marketing strategy and approach really is built around the diverse guests at the core. One, from a business case perspective, if you look at our strategic cohorts and where the growth is coming from, we wouldn't be able to reach our future growth targets without a diverse guest, period. So that's the business case for it. And then the other piece of that too is the beauty community is inherently diverse. But I would say it's not always equitable or inclusive. And I think that's where the work comes in. And we were brainstorming a little bit yesterday of like, what the heck do we talk about? Everyone talks about DEI, like what are some of the things that hopefully can give you guys some insights? And part of that is just like being real about the struggles and the challenges, because it's hard, we don't always get it right. And how do you though really make it a key part of what you focus on throughout your marketing efforts overall in order to kind of move ahead?
I think for PepsiCo, and I don't have a ton to add to what was said, but at PepsiCo, everything we do is for generally the mass market, right? We do everything in a really big way. We try to touch as many people as we possibly can. And trying to say you're going to touch everybody is quite daunting. But I think part of what we think about from a marketing specific lens is how do we make sure that what we do from a marketing perspective reflects the true base that is the United States today, right? The true base of the United States today is quite diverse. We have tons of different types of representation across age and gender and race, and it just looks very different than it did when PepsiCo was working on marketing Cheetos 20 years ago, right?
Love Cheetos.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. And so as we think about what it looks like to truly touch everybody, we've taken sort of taking a step back in the way we think about targeting, which is sort of the opposite of what you learn in business school, to get a really tight, focused target. We say, what does it look like to draw our circle 1 or 2 rings bigger? And what would it look like to include people 1 or 2 rings outside of our normal target market and reflect those throughout the entire marketing process? I know we'll get into it more a little bit, but that's a little bit of how we think about it.
On the next, let's take a look at like creating stories. What are you doing to create stories that are inclusive and representative of your full color or full customer base to produce that authentic, to Sophia's comment before, content that incorporates the nuances across all points of diversity? Ensure what you say, what you write, what you release reflects your organization. I thought Miller was doing an excellent examples of that. I'd love to hear from your organizations what you're doing.
Oh, now you're volunteering. Thanks, favor back. I feel like this is a really big question and a really hard question, because when you think about, first of all, even that list of what you say, what you write, what you release, I would add to it what you do as an organization, because I think in this space of DE&I marketing, especially in the past few years since the George Floyd murder and everything that happened, you saw all these brands, okay, black squares across the board, I'm going to change my logo to blah, blah, blah. And yes, there's that, and then there's diversity and representation of authentic stories. But one thing that we always talk a lot about is what do we have as a brand to be able to back up what we say from an action perspective. And that's sort of what I was alluding to at the top, is so much broader than marketing. Like, what are you guys as an organization, what are companies doing holistically when we say, yes, we're going to tell authentic stories of Black beauty. Okay, great. And what do your teams look like behind the scenes? What are corporate initiatives and corporate commitments to be able to back up what you say? And so that is always kind of the holistic picture that we take a look at. And I think the other challenging part is like the nuances of these authentic stories, because there's so much to unpack there of like, how does your brand have permission to go there and say a certain thing? Are you saying it in your brand's voice? Or is another approach to lean into, in the world of social media, like creators who are actually part of that community, a diverse representation of voices, and how you go about that? I don't know if I actually answered the question. I just kind of talked in a circle.
I'll
Part
add
of it's a conversation, I think, not necessarily always
Yeah.
the answer.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think in telling authentic stories, one of my favorite things to do with my team is make sure that we're telling a real story. We oftentimes don't make up stories. We don't fictionalize a lot of the stories we tell, whether it's on social or in an ad or in a piece of copy. It's a real story from a real person who actually lives that experience. And that's how we make sure that not only are we not telling a story, I'm not telling a story of an Asian American person from the perspective of a black woman, because I'm just not going to understand. And it's reflected authentically because the experience is someone's actual lived experience, right? That's one of the things we try to do, and to be able to get to those real stories, it requires talking to a lot of people a lot of the time. I'm super proud of the fact that my team is extremely diverse. We do that purposely. I do that purposely, but we don't always have all the answers in our team. And sometimes that means going and finding someone from supply chain to talk to who might actually have that lived experience, or going and having more ethnographies and talking to more consumers and doing more of that work regularly. It takes, in my opinion, it's a very intentional thing to tell someone else's story and not translate it through your own lens or your own voice or something like that. And so it's work and it's intentionality to go and find that, and then make sure that it's reflected through the entire marketing process, the agency members working on it, the team members helping to translate it. It doesn't mean that I would have a team of only Asian American women working on something, but it does mean that we have those gut checks, we have those check-ins along the way to make sure that at the end of the day, the story that shows up does feel authentic to the person it's trying to represent.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point too about the team inside. Is really important to building the message that you send externally, because if your team internally is not diverse, doesn't have that representation, doesn't bring those viewpoints, it's really hard to show up authentically externally.
Great. That kind of just leads into just a point before I go on, like Google. I don't know if any of you saw our Pixel just announced, right, the latest Pixel, but their big Super Bowl commercial with Michelle actually reached out to me. It was about Real Tone, where they developed a whole camera that see people of color and actually shows up in the different shades of color and are truly, but when they went through the process of all that product development, they actually went out and looked beyond, like people that were real photographers, not in technology, but that have been in photography, people of color for years and years, and interviewed them and brought them into the process. So paid people way beyond their own teams. So externally bringing people into that whole process, I think, is super important in the conversation. When if it doesn't exist within your own teams, or even like you said, going out to supply chain, if it's not within, can certainly help in that area. What is your favorite? Well, this is funny. Aside from Miller, because I thought they did an excellent job, but what's your favorite example of DE&I marketing that you've seen from a brand? Aside from Google, the one I just shared.
That was my answer. I'm not even joking. That was my answer. So now I'm trying to think of another one. Come back to me. Give me a second.
I could jump in. Probably not. I think what's in my headspace right now is sort of what I was talking about, brand acts, to really back up what you put out there from a marketing perspective. This isn't really D&I, but I think everyone saw what Patagonia did as far as, okay, this is our company's purpose. It's not just a marketing campaign, but we're going to do something about it. The other brand that always is a shining star for me is Dove, and what they've done around beauty. I mean, what was it, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Real beauty and the conversations around there. We do consumer studies, and they still bring that up because it's just that iconic thing of what they've done. But then more recently, Dove leaning into the Crown Act and kind of really using their position as beauty leaders, industry leaders, to authentically drive change and progress, everything in the STEAM space.
Yeah, the Dove campaign I think was, I really like that one too, because I think that changed a lot of attitudes. It was something that no company like them had done before. But just talk about authenticity, like bringing like real women into that conversation. And I really think that was a catalyst, because you see more and more of that in consumer marketing. We started to do, when I was at Groupon, we started to do real customer stories, and about doing that rather than like, stock photography or models or actors doing that.
So I go back to mine. Okay, it still is the Google Pixel one, but just really quickly I will tell you before I give you my other answer. It's because as a consumer, I felt so seen for the first time in 30 plus years of living. I was like, oh my God, someone gets it. I take a picture of me or my son or my husband, and the picture's too dark. And it's taken someone 30 plus years to fix that on a smartphone. So that is one of the reasons why it's my favorite. My husband has a Google Pixel, actually, and we take great pictures on it of our family. But actually, and this is not because I'm sitting in Ulta, but I got an email from Ulta. I'm a big Ulta shopper. I'm a platinum member. I have been for a really long time.
Shop the diamond. Shop a little
Oh
more.
no, I'm sorry. I am diamond.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. And I'm diamond through 2023 already. But I got an email from Ulta one day that was all about curly hair, textured hair. And my hair is straight today, but it's naturally curly. I wear it curly half the time. And in the email, it was walking through all the processes, the detangling step, are you going to pre-wash, are you going to co-wash, are you going to deep condition, all the things. And then when it got to the end, it talked about protecting your hair when you sleep. And it had ads or links to like satin pillowcases and satin scarves and bonnets. And I was like, somebody here talked to a black woman. Because no one else would, no other demographic would understand what it looks like when I go to sleep with my hair other than a black woman. I was like, this is good. That was one of my favorite, and it came from Ulta, but it was just, and it was simple, right? It was an email, I went through the whole thing, but it was clear that you were talking to me from the perspective of me.
See, I think stories like that can't happen without diversity behind the scenes, and even going back to your Google Pixel example overall. So yes, it's about talking to photographers, and I know, Michelle, we've had conversations about like data, which is theoretically neutral, but it's not, because humans start to, I'm so not a data person as far as like the computer backgrounds behind it, but so forgive me if I'm not using the right language specifically to this table over here. But as far as like unbiasing data and how you shape machine learning and all of that things and point it truly in an equitable way, an equitable perspective, you think that, okay, it should just be built in. Equity should be just built in, but it's not. Because of all about the biases out there. So
yeah, it's a huge challenge in tech, because to that point, like for all the training data that we used to train smartphones for years were white faces, and that extends into other training data we use about like how people, will this work? Will this resonate with somebody? Well, let's compare it against this training data set, which is all just this one slice, this one segment of population. We talk about it internally with the data team. We really work to make sure that we have a very diverse set of training data, or just different sample sizes if we're doing like user research, so that we actually get that full picture of it.
and it's different facets of diversity too, right? Like we talk about skin tone, hair texture, but there's also age and face shape and eye shape and all of the intersectionalities and everything. If you look at the up-and-coming generations of Gen Z being the most diverse generation out there, and even just intersectionalities and how that all works, yeah, it's very exciting to see what new technologies and things may come up.
Excellent, thank you. What are some of the pitfalls or examples of failures you've seen in this space?
I think a lot, for at least for me, what I've seen in the industry is a lot of them come back to inauthenticity. where a brand, a company they try to follow a trend without really understanding, without really speaking in a real way about what their connection is to it. They think, oh, this is cool and trendy, and we're going to talk about it. For those of you who love memes, there's a famous Steve Buscemi meme where he's dressed in a red hoodie holding a skateboard, and he's clearly like 50, but he's in a high school hallway and he says, hello fellow kids. And the joke of the meme is like, clearly he does not understand what it means to be a high school kid. And I think that's where a lot of the failures come from, is like, oh, people are talking about this, we should do it. But I think the first step, and Lisa talked about this, is understanding like what your connection is to it and how to show up on that.
Michelle, Lisa, anything to add? Top of mind.
I think that's a good answer. I mean, if I think about like specific failures I've seen, they all stem from a level of inauthenticity, and it happens further up in the process. It happens further up in the funnel, right, where the failure happened. You just see the execution in the market. So I don't think I have much to add to that.
Yeah. I think the one thought is recognizing sometimes it's not for a lack of positive intent, right? There's a lot of people who want to do the right things. Like, yes, we should post about whatever day, and Juneteenth,
Which we talked about.
Walmart, Juneteenth ice cream. It's like, okay, maybe originally, early on, it's like the idea or the intent was right, but throughout the execution, and that's where nuance is so important, and gut checking against the communities are so important, whether in formal consumer research or even just like internal associates, and having that environment of trust and open discussion so that people can be like, yo, that is not cool. Someone needs to just cut that.
Yes.
How are each of you thinking about when you work with your partners that you have to, your brand so much, and holding each other accountable as to what they're doing? So, as it relates to this topic, are there like purposeful meetings that are being set up to discuss that, or is it just more embedded in your part of your conversations that you're having? Your partners, particular, maybe?
I can kick off. For us, PepsiCo doesn't have like a multicultural focused team or anything like that. It is our responsibility as leaders of our team and of our business to embed it and ingrain it into what we do. And so when I hire new agency partners, that's something that we talk about when we hire new agency partners. And I won't hire a team if the entire agency looks homogenous. I just won't. And I could be homogenous, Caucasian, black, it doesn't matter. I won't hire a homogenous agency team. And part of what we do is my team understanding that they come to expect this from me. But we're gonna have conversations like this all the time. It should be as easy of a conversation, but I should say normal. The conversations aren't always easy, but as normal of a conversation to have as me asking you what last week's share numbers look like. It should be that ingrained into how we do our business. And so we have a conversation about something, we're reviewing creative, we're talking about campaign big brand ideas. We should be integrating all the aspects of what does diversity look like, equity, inclusion, throughout the whole piece, while we're talking about the brand objective, the marketing objective, the target audience, all of that. If it doesn't come up, that means we've missed something, and we probably need to have a conversation. Because if it doesn't come up, something or someone is being unintentionally excluded. And if you're not intentionally including, then you are unintentionally excluding. And so we make it a part of like the regular process. But it's a muscle that you have to continue to flex and get your teams comfortable flexing, even when you're not in the room help leading the conversation. So I think it's like, as much as we ingrain it, it hasn't stopped being intentional. I'll say that.
Yeah, it has to be conscious. You have to always think about it.
We draw some really hard lines around like suppliers. So if you go, part of what Chief does is we call clubhouses in some different cities. There's one here in Chicago, in Fulton Market, New York, LA. And if you go into a clubhouse as a member and you get a glass of wine, because we do serve snacks and drinks there, that winery is owned by a woman. If you get a margarita, that tequila was created by a woman-owned distillery. So we're very intentional about supplier choice, and that matches our values.
Is there anything else to add, Lisa? No, I'm good. Been talking a lot.
I think some of these we've kind of blended into some of ours. I was looking at the team makeup, the agency, we've touched on that. Maybe just we could end here. I don't know how we're doing actually on time. What does the future of DE&I marketing look like? What are meaningful, authentic ways for brands to show up? So something new. So talk about a new idea maybe here that we haven't touched on yet. That you're starting to, I think maybe even Lisa, you touched on that in terms of technology and how it's playing a part as well. That's one. If there's others, or if you want to expand in that area or something that we touched on.
Yeah, I don't know if this gets to higher order, but I think it just goes to the role of business in driving societal change. I think you mentioned it as societal good.
Yeah.
And we all have our purpose statements out there, and I think in the past it was like charitable marketing or just some CSR marketing, some sort of term. But I think nowadays it's when we look at, sorry if this is like way too high order, but the progress in society and who truly is driving that. There's individuals, there's government, there's business. I think business has more of a role than we think than it has in the past, right? Especially, and I think in beauty, especially when we think about beauty's role in everyone's lives and representation and what people see on commercials and in the content that we put out there. Mark Pritchard, who's the chief, I think, brand officer at P&G, always says marketing for growth as well as good, right? Because if you watch, sure, we could talk about representation in TV and actual like films out there, but commercials too. That's what people see, and that is sort of our role to kind of advance the conversations in that as well as the other ways.
Yeah, I'm not obviously a marketer. I'm a tech guy. I'm marketing adjacent. I support the marketing function, but from a like a brand voice standpoint, one of the things that we think a lot about is our role in talking about issues that matter to women broadly, and that does take us. And I think this is where companies are. It takes you into uncharted territory, and often like some not uncontroversial territory. When the Dobbs decision came down from the Supreme Court earlier this year, we made a deliberate choice to talk about it and talk about our support for Roe and our support for reproductive rights, because we felt very strongly that women's ability to advance in their careers starts with their ability to make decisions about their own lives. Now, there was probably more receptivity in the broader chief community about that, but it wasn't without controversy. But we felt that that was a position that was important for us to take. And I think I know companies have had this debate that we're just going to stay out of social issues. I just don't think you can. I don't think you can, and really build a successful company, a successful brand. And going back to authenticity, speak authentically about it. I don't think there's a way to avoid it. I think your employees want you to talk about it, your customers want you to talk about it, and you do have to be mindful of what makes sense for you, what doesn't. But I just think that's just part of marketing today.
I agree with you, because I think when you've built a brand that truly has strong consumer love, your consumers do get upset when you don't talk about the issues that matter to them, right? And that's how you know you've done a good job as a brand builder, building something and building a brand that people care about. And I'll join you on the like higher social order and realm of things. I do think I agree with you. I think brands have a responsibility. There's this, and I'll get the number or the stat wrong, but they talk about how you might watch a movie 1 or 2 times, maybe 3 if it's your favorite, but in a day you'll be exposed to like 10,000 ads, right? You might see the same ad 40 plus times. That image and what that story is telling you is far more impactful on your life than any one movie you watch 1 or 2 times, or any book you read, or anything like that. Not that we should stop reading books or watching movies or engaging in the arts, but I agree with you. I think there's a higher social responsibility that we have to our consumers. And you know, when I think about things that are like new, I don't know if it's new, but one of the things I noticed, there's a brand. I'm a big beauty person, so I actually really love being here.
We should be friends.
There's a reason I'm diamond through 23 already. But one of the things you always notice in foundation or concealers, right, is that when you're numbering shades, they start at the lightest and they go to the darkest. So when I look for shades, I'm always well into the 20s or the 30s or the 40s or whatever. I just know where to go. I just know where to look. There's a brand out there, and I think you guys actually carry it. It's called Oma Beauty, and their shades are flipped. Number 1 is the darkest shade in their lineup, and number 20-something is their absolute fairest. And when I think about what it truly looks like to be inclusive, this is a brand that said, I am creating this for everyone, but I'm doing it through the lens of a dark-skinned woman. And I'm starting with number 1. This is number 1. You're not always at the end of the line, right? You're not always like this. And to take concepts like that are so ingrained in how we do business, how we set up products, how we do anything, and flipping it makes people pay attention. I paid attention because when I went to go try that foundation and I jumped to the end, I was like, wait a second, that is not my color. Let me back up a second, and it made me pay attention. It made me think about how ingrained it is the way I shop for beauty products, right, or the way I shop for anything. And so I think as DE&I and the inclusion aspect of that becomes more ingrained in how we do business, I think we're going to see more examples of people completely flipping a lot of the ingrained norms of how we do things. And I'm personally excited for that. I think that's fun. I think that's exciting. I think that's where a lot of the marketing magic lives. I think that's where a lot of opportunity for really surprising and delighting consumers and making them feel seen in a new way lives. And ultimately, as a marketer, like that's how you build brand love with your consumers, right? And that's how you further what you're trying to do as an organization, regardless of your marketing objectives. So stuff like that is stuff I'm excited to see.
I love all of that, but I think we're out of time. So I don't know what I could like talk a lot about.
I know.
Where we end.
So we're to wrap it. Okay. Thank you for being on the panel today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas, and for everyone listening. It is a meaningful topic that we could probably spend the entire day on, and maybe one day that could be a topic for brand innovators to have all sessions. Well, I feel like each of them have sort of touched on it, which is great to see. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for participating.